right, everybody. Once again, you're listening to the Evolution Security Podcast. I am really excited to be here with my twin bro, Eric Davis. We are the Tactical Twins. How you doing, brother?
Doing great. As you well know, I'm on the road. So I'm also, you might hear my voice. I've been talking so much down here during this support that I'm losing my voice a little bit. So I'll do my best. But, being on the road, I enjoy my job on the road. But it's about time to head home. When this airs, I'll be home. So that'll be nice.
Good.
So,
well, we're excited to have a legend on the show, Mr. Kelly McCann. Thank you so much for coming on, Kelly.
Hey, my pleasure, guys.
Well, audience out there, a lot of you should know exactly who Kelly McCann is, but I'll start off just off the cuff here a second. As a young man, a lot of the audience knows I've been a martial artist, since, I was a young person. And since I can remember, I remember picking up Black Belt magazine and Guns and Ammo, I believe it was, several other magazines. And back then, Kelly, I'll just say you were writing as Jim Glover at that point, correct?
Yeah, Jim Grover.
Yep. Grover, I'm sorry, pardon me.
No worries.
Freudian slip, Jim Grover. Yeah. I've known you as Kelly McCann so long, I messed that up. But anyway, so yeah, I remember, how valuable that information was back then. So it's just really cool, full circle. And we're going to talk about where we met recently as well. But audience members out there, Kelly has done, I would say, more than any person I know in this realm that would develop the mind that Kelly has. So I'm going to hit on some highlights from his bio. So Mr. McCann is a recognized subject matter expert in individual protection measures, anti-terrorism, counterterrorism, high-risk environment force protection, close combat, close quarters battle, apprehension avoidance, high-risk protective services, and a myriad of high-risk environment tactics, techniques, and procedures, TTPs. He was commissioned in the U.S. Marine Corps in May of 1980 after earning a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from St. Anselm College, Manchester, New Hampshire. He served as an infantry platoon commander, then raid company commander in 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines. In 1986, Mr. McCann provided all SWAT training to the Metropolitan Police Special Operations Unit, Boston, Massachusetts. He served as the Master of Ceremonies at the International Jurist Council on Violence and Terrorism in Boston the same year. He was identified by the Commandant of the Marine Corps in 1987 to screen, select, and train the counter-terrorist force in 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force for the Marine Corps. Mr. McCann is a plank owner, which is an original member of 3rd MEF Special Operations Training Group, creating and leading the Special Mission Selection. Following his SOTG tour, Mr. McCann was ordered to the Special Operations Low Intensity Conflict Section of the Marine Air Ground Task Force Warfighting Center, Quantico, Virginia. En route from 3rd MEF, he was temporarily assigned to the Legal Attaché, London, England, to interface with the 22nd Special Air Service, SAS, legit, and the Royal Marine Special Boat Squadron. He also worked with both SO-13 Surveillance and PT-17 Force Firearms Unit of Scotland Yard in London. I'd like to hit on something, ask a little bit about that here in a second, Kelly.
Sure.
He was also assigned as a counter-drug liaison officer with the Drug Enforcement Administration. Now at this point, Major McCann, Kelly was assigned to the intelligence support activity to assume sensitive duties in conjunction with national security objectives. Following this tour, Mr. McCann resigned his regular commission in 1990 and found in personal defense measures as a sole proprietorship. proprietorship. Excuse me. Again, tripping over my voice right now. Mr. McCann was hired by a U.S. government contract to develop and institute concealed weapons course, combative skills program, street crime avoidance program, and as a primary instructor in high-risk environment driving techniques. During this period, he trained Jonas, is that
Savimbi, yeah.
protection detail in Angola, and Jean Bertrand, and how I don't know how to pronounce that, but
That was President Aristide in Haiti.
you know what? I was going to guess Aristide. Protection detail in Haiti, and a host of other allied forces. So Mr. McCann was called back onto active duty as a major by the ISA, a U.S. Army Special Unit, a U.S. Army Special Mission Unit, SMU, in January. I think I know a little bit about that. 1994 for 6 months to conduct HRET, high risk environment tactics training, and pre-deployment training in the areas of protected service details, combative skills, HRE driving, and related skills, and to increase the hit probability and lethality of the primary weapon systems, utilizing COTS, or commercial off-the-shelf equipment, as an interim solution. Mr. McCann provided training and operational support to Amoco Oil, operating in Colombia, as well as security companies in the region, providing protective personnel to preventing kidnapping. He trained ARCO security escorts and expatriates in Venezuela and Donald Trump's protection detail in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Mr. McCann was the technical advisor, program manager, and subject matter expert for the ambassadorial details in Bosnia from 1996 and 1999. So, and this gets to some of the other stuff that I started learning about Mr. McCann on. In 2000, Mr. McCann changed the name of his company, previously PDM Personal Defensive Measures, to Crucible. And actually, I would say this was the second phase of what I was following you, Mr. McCann, and was awarded the contract to train and evaluate all U.S. police officers traveling to Kosovo as part of the United Nations International Police Monitor Program. Mr. McCann traveled to Skopje, Macedonia, and Pristina, Kosovo, in conjunction with these duties to the trained personnel left in theater. Crucible also trained, evaluated, and deployed with U.S. police monitors to East Timor, Indonesia. Crucible subsequently trained and evaluated over 20,000 U.S. police monitors from over 650 different jurisdictions. Okay, during this period, Mr. McCann traveled to Iraq to create the Security Management Center, a full-service security support center for contractors in Iraq. The SMC provided and managed protective services, details, convoy security, fixed-point security, surveillance detection, and other essential security support for several clients there. So, kind of hitting on these highlights here, Mr. McCann, you are a Black Belt Magazine Hall of Fame member, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Just call me Kelly, man.
Yeah, sorry. It's ever since the Combatives summit. It's hard not to say so. Ladies and gentlemen, there's so much more on this bio. It's amazing what Kelly has been able to do. So I'll just say this, and right now you are currently, your brand is Combatives brand, correct? But you may be,
correct.
Yep. And so anybody, we're gonna be putting all this in the show notes, so you'll be able to follow Kelly if you don't already. So with that said, Kelly, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, and this is a long time coming. You know, what's funny is that I thought about reaching out to you probably, I don't know, a couple of years ago. And I don't know why I didn't. I didn't have any direct connection with you, but, we reach out to people, just across the internet. I should have done so, but when we met briefly at the Combative Summit in Florida back in this last year, September, I'm like, I cannot believe we haven't had you on yet. I think I mentioned that to you, but for all that said, I'll just ask you this: was not the Combative Summit phenomenal?
Oh man, I mean, listen, that was a blast, right? To be co-located with not just the instructor staff from the Combatives Association, but all the participants that were there was just phenomenal, and it kind of caught me by surprise, man. It was Craig Douglas that spoke to John Valentine and Matt Larson and suggested that they had me down. And John, who's a prince of a guy, man, he called me up and he said, "Hey, this is us. We'd really like to have you come down." And I said, "Sure." In what capacity? He said, "I'd really like you to just kind of do a general roundup of your uh, perception of the combatives community today, where it's come from." Because, I'm 65 now, so I've been doing this shit for a long time, So he was just very interested in like the evolution of combatives and where it's going and who the players are. So I said, sure. So we were, I think, no, we didn't have a fight that weekend. I think we came down just for the summit. No, we did have a fight. We had a fight in Tampa for the CFFC. So it was really convenient anyway, because we had a fight, MMA fight in Tampa, and then we just hooked up the ride over. So it was really, really good anyway. And I just found everybody really engaged. There weren't any attitudes. There weren't any egos. Um, I I just thought, when you have a group of people like that, right? Both students and instructors, sometimes there can be this huge collision of egos, and it makes it unenjoyable for everybody. But that wasn't the case. I mean, we rolled in heavy and had a great time, had a bunch of laughs, drank some whiskey, listened to some of the other instructors. It was just a really good experience, Eric.
Yeah, it was amazing. I learned a lot, and it was amazing meeting. And like you said, the clients, and we've talked about this, and I also say this probably too much, is that sometimes our audience are, man, the Combative Summit again, but it's that important. I'm sure that's not the case, but
Yep.
um, what John Valentine, of course, he really arranged it with a group of individuals. Um, it was an amazing time, and like you said, there was no egos
No.
whatsoever. And again, I mean, I count, of course, you and of course Matt Larson, and Craig as well. Craig's a little younger, and not, I'm saying he's probably 10 years. He's probably about 10 years younger than you.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely count you guys as some of the fathers of the modern combatives for certain, if I can say that. With that said, I mean, I'll just segue into that. What is your honest opinion of the direction of combatives? And do you feel it's going in the right direction? Do we still have kind of this schism of people that really don't understand what's necessary? And on the other side, are we heading in the right direction?
That's a great question. The best way to give you a real time example of combatives. So I just came back from Chile. We were down there training the representatives from the close combat school at their commandos and their SEALs. And we were consulting to a company, Grupo Bellator, GRUPO Bellator, BELATOR, that's super professional, all manned by former commandos, Chilean commandos, just super professional. And they have their own combatives instructors. So they asked me during the visit, we were actually down there doing consulting on the industrial logging industry because they provide security. There's a lot of violence by the indigenous Indians against that industry. So they just recently, in fact, the day that we left, the night before, they killed 3 police officers and then burned them.
Mm.
So it's a highly contested area. So we were down right in the middle of that and consulting with them on that. And then when we did the combatives, those Chilean instructors are really good, but old style combatives. They haven't yet matriculated these new skills. So people ask me, would you bring them up to speed and kind of give them a 50,000 foot flyover? And how I explained it to them was, the old style combatives, the 90s combatives, if you will, 80s and 90s combatives period, typified by use of meat puppets, a lot of World War II influence with open hand strikes, axe hands, cupped hand blows, hammer fists, all that stuff. And, sprinkled with FMA, sprinkled with a smattering of everything, right? Very eclectic mix. And the way I explained it to them was, you didn't waste your time. You learned valid skills, but those skills are only going to get you so far against a person who has skills. And I said, the trend in the U.S. now is, of course, the entangled gunfight, right? The entanglement with knife edge weapons on the ground, and increased ground training. If you remember back in the 80s or the 90s, before the UFC, before Gracie's came into town and all that, a lot of the combatives people would always say, oh, never go to the ground. Don't ever go to the ground, which, when you really think about it, is an arrogant statement. Because if someone has no ground skills and they're fighting somebody out on the street, say the kid was or the guy, the attacker, was a former high school wrestler, you're going on the ground, and there's nothing you're going to do to stop it. So it's an arrogant statement for all these combative guys to say, don't ever go to the ground, because it may not be your choice. And then when your ass hits the ground, you're not going to have anything, right? So that's the first point. The second point is, let's not kid each other. If you're getting tuned up on your feet, your only safe mode might be to take it to the ground, just to kind of get control of things and recover so that you can continue to fight. So there was a lot of those kind of misplaced thoughts back then. And I think that the new style combatives is a necessary progression. John Valentine, we're talking today, and he was like, a lot of people they're not progressing because they'll put their name on a technique, or they'll hang their flag and say, no, this is the way it is. And then they feel duty bound to defend that because their name is associated with it, because they think that people will ridicule them, or that they'll, seem to be kind of foolish. When in fact, the exact opposite thing is true. If you're teaching the same thing today that you were teaching 10 or 15 years ago, you're outdated, man. You're obsolete, and your client base deserves better than that. So I'm very pleased with the direction this is going. I'm very happy to it's brought me back to the table to learning. Our guys are out here tonight, but my ground game was never shit because I was always a stand-up guy. I was an old boxer and Muay Thai guy, and I'm really comfortable with these. I'm good with them. And I've gone back to school. I've gone back to school as a student to
Awesome.
at least be, so I can have a conversation, an intelligent conversation with someone, So now I'd rank my ground skills as moderate. I've got some. I'm not a black belt, or I don't have a belt. I don't really give a shit about belts, but I can hold my own. Still going to bias the stand up, but it was necessary for me to learn ground and the vocabulary, and be able to look across and recognize the technique. And to be honest with you, the thing that really drove that, we've been a fight gym for 20 years. So the MMA thing forced that, right? Because I couldn't just be the Muay Thai coach. I had to actually be able to corner my guys effectively and notice what the other guys were doing, the opponents, and what we needed to do. So it reinvigorated me, the old dog, to learn new tricks. It is really good.
That's awesome. And you mentioned John Valentine. We've met John Valentine through this show, conversing, because he had become a listener to the show, and I listened to podcasts that he had done in the past on other venues, and we just kind of became friends from there. But incidentally, on the way to Florida, I was driving from North Carolina, where my wife and I live. I'm stationed there as a civilian, and I'm driving down there, and that was one of the podcasts I listened to, was your interview with John. And there's so much that I was like, man, I wish I had my notebook out. So I had to re-listen to it. And and I could stand to do that again. But John is, he is a very, very important piece of the success of some things going on right now in the combatives world, and I'm
And a,
really, really proud to know him. He's a
and a
good,
very genuine and sincere guy. I mean, you don't meet a lot of people that are that genuine and that sincere. There's nothing behind the curtain with him. It's right out in the open. I really think well of him.
awesome,
Mhm.
and yeah, great guy. So one other follow up on that, you're out there, you travel a lot, you teach a lot, but the direction that combatives is going. So the information's on the table. There's prolific information on it. Do you think there's still this same 20, 30,000 people that really give a shit about it and they're moving along and progressing, or do you feel like the proliferation of the information, MMA, firearms, do you see that community is growing, maybe anecdotally, or do you think it's the same?
So that's an interesting question, Eric, because this thing really breaks down into two broad categories and then a lot less. Like next week, I'm training the first 27-man group out of 400 for the government, and that'll be a 400-man effort. Over time, they want one like every other week or whatever. And those guys are official users, and so they're serious about it and all that stuff. But the way that it breaks down is actually you've got hobbyism, and then you've got users. Okay, and users, you can drill and go past familiarity to actual skill. Um, they're accruing actual skill. You know what I mean? They're achieving actual skill instead of just being familiar with it. And they'll put the necessary dwell time in drills, first learning the drill, then doing it with a little bit of resistance, and then doing it like with a lot of resistance, like all of the resistance. And that's important because you cannot learn to fight without fighting.
Right.
I have this conversation with so many people, and it's like, well, we use air shields, we use focus. I get all that, right? And fantastic. But you can't learn to drive a car until you sit in the seat and successfully drive that car, navigating obstacles, being careful, and arriving at your destination. Same thing is true drive or flying a plane. You can go online and learn how to control it, but until you actually do it, you haven't flown a plane. So hobbyists don't necessarily like to actually fight, right? Because there's pain involved, there's discomfort, there's awkwardness when you lose, and there's going to be a winner and there's going to be a loser. Where in the MMA community, it's just part of it, right? I mean, it's a very natural thing. We spar all the time. Sometimes you come out on the right end, sometimes you come out on the wrong end, and you fix it. So if you look at the trend in user groups, it's almost like the new CrossFit, I feel, right? Like, how CrossFit came out and then started wearing, and, we've been CrossFit coaches, and we used to offer that out at Crucible and all that shit, but it became kind of like a cult. It's
Yep.
kind of
Oh,
like
absolutely.
a culty kind of thing, wearing our knee socks, taking our shirts off. You could look across the room and recognize someone who did it. And I think that a lot of people take combatives because they know they need to do something, but it's actually more for the social aspect. It fills a gap in their life that they can't fill any other way, right? So they go to combatives, they like the guys they're with, drink a few beers after training, they become friends, and it becomes basically violent golf, for those people. And that's fine, and it's still better than doing nothing. But those are the kinds of people that in class, when you're teaching and you're repping stuff out, what I normally do is start repping stuff out. Then I keep changing partners. So you have to do it against tall, against short, against heavy, against light, against athletic, against non-agile. Then you can really solidify the skill and say, no matter what the guy is in front of me, I can adapt and apply the skill. But when you have hobbyists, they want to do 10 reps, 15 reps, and then they're asking what's next. It's like, what's next? You haven't even mastered that skill. You haven't even got that ready to go. So why do you want to move on? Because then you end up knowing or being familiar with 50 things instead of absolutely owning 10 that could save your life. So
Absolutely.
it's kind of a weird thing. And truthfully, it's a perspective thing. I'm still an official user. I still do a lot of USG training, a lot of foreign allied government training. You saw in the resume. Yeah, we're still deeply involved. So from my perception, if it's less than that, you're not really an official user. So how committed are you? So there's like, you get the official users that are committed. And by the way, all the official users don't like it, right? I
Right.
mean, Combatives is far less well attended than shooting.
Yeah.
Offer a shooting class, you got a full stack of people. You offer Combatives and like be there at 07 in the morning, and it's always light because people don't like to get hit. They don't like to feel pain. So it's kind of a weird thing. Whereas when you go into the MMA community, you wouldn't be doing that unless you absolutely loved it. You just wouldn't. So there's that gap between official users who are smart enough to know they have to do it. Then you've got the MMA guys and Muay Thai guys and boxers that are combat sports guys. They know they have to do it because you can get really hurt. And then you got the middle guys that they know they should, but how serious are they really going to be? Now there are groups out there that tell me, "Oh, I have this basement group and we go at it really hard." And then they'll send me a video and it's just like, dude, if you think that's like hard and being committed, you're kicking a kick shield. You're hitting a focus mitt. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is actually intending to land on the other guy as he actually intends to land on you and suffering the consequences, whether it's a pucked up nose or a bloody ear or a black eye. It's just part of it. And a lot of people are just unwilling.
Yeah, that absolutely is true. And for our audience, I mean, most know I think we've defined combatives fairly decent, but can you give a summary, a definition for folks that may not really know when we say combatives?
Mm-hmm.
It means a lot of different things to a lot
It
of
sure
people.
does.
So can you provide the audience your definition of what combatives means?
Yeah, and that's another good question, right? So if you get my book, Combatives for Street Survival, it was published by Black Belt. It's still around. You can get it on Amazon and shit like that. I have it written out, but generally speaking, combatives is principle based, right? It's not technique based. Now, what I mean by that is techniques can go wrong, right? They can fail. Principles are never wrong. I'll give you an example. Back of the elbow, we call perpendicularity. So if I'm standing with you and we're fighting, stand up, you're never wrong to get to the back of an elbow. Never, right? Because face to face, it's 50-50. The minute I get to the back of your elbow, it's 75-25. And that's where I want to be. It's almost like jujitsu, right? Position before submission. We use PSP, which is position, speed, and power. So I want to get in the right position in order to attack, from that angle. So that principle is true standing up. But if you knock me down and I'm on my back and you mount me, it's still correct, right? I go quarter hip. I go to the outside of your elbow. I'm still safe from ground and pound, and I'm still doing the best I can to defend myself. So combatives is a principled backed set of techniques. Okay. And those techniques are easily sequenced to become accessible. So they link, right? It's like boxing combinations: 1-2-3. You go 4-3-2. You go 1-1-2-3-2. Right? Those are individual techniques that link together very ergonomically, very naturally. Well, the way I teach combatives, it's the same thing. They should ergonomically flow. An example of that is I go low high. So that's another principle, right? The high low principle. I don't want to dwell on the high targets or the low targets. So I might knee you in the balls. And when you react to that, then I hit you in the back of the head with my elbow. So that's low high. See what I mean? So when I teach classes, I'm calling out those principles continually. And what I've found is that the more sequences, or when you start to actually fight, the more principles that you can point out and say, okay, I just did this. And look, I used perpendicularity. I used high low. I used the right weapon. I used explosive power. I used, you know what I mean? So the validity comes from, well, this one thing I did used 5 principles. It kind of validates it, you know. The way I teach combatives now is simple but very, very difficult. And what I mean by that is, used to be meat puppet, here's what I'm doing, emulate what you see me doing, and they would do that, right? So you got a partner who will be a little bit resistant, and they do exactly what I'm doing, right? Okay, good. Now the way we teach it is, there's no more meat puppets. It's a fully dynamic, resistant training partner, okay? And all I tell them is, once you know the individual techniques, how to punch, how to kick, how to elbow, how to knee, the open hand strikes that still exist in the system, just get yourself in the right position and beat them up, because you already have the techniques. You can do anything you want when you're in the right position, right? So the people, I find, when they're new, want to be fed an absolute formula. They want, no, tell me exactly what you want me to do. That's a 101 approach, because, I'm 5'8", I weigh 165 pounds. I can't make a guy that's, 6'2" and weighs 230 pounds move like me. I can't. I fight as a short person would. So I want to pull you down. I don't want to fight up. I want to pull you down. That tall guy should stand tall and make the smaller fighter fight up, right? So what's right for me can't be right for him. So I'm really big on, come to my classes, learn all of this approach, the principle and everything, and then you go make the combatives that's right for you. You make your own style, basically, right? You have seen the pieces, we drilled them, you mastered them. Now you do the work and you figure out the way that you want to, and then pressure test the piss out of it,
There you go. Yeah, and I think that ultimately what you're speaking on is all of that can be pressure tested, to where, again, pressure testing is obviously a form of sparring. But none of the techniques or principles that you learn, you're not going to own them until you've done them in some form of repetition and in some form of
consequential
pressure.
contact.
Yeah, absolutely. When your opponent has freedom and you have freedom.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's funny, Eric and Aaron, because I had a troll. You can always see the trolls because they'll come on to something you post and you check their profile. They have 0 followers, they have 0 likes, and they have, like, it's very obvious who's a troll.
0 content.
Yes. And some smartass came up on a post we had, and it was something, he was asking a general question, like, to my followers, going, well, does anyone know if this guy's actually been this or that? And people were like destroying him. They were like, dude, do you know what you're talking about? But what I did was, we were down in Tampa for another fight, CFFC fight. We're down there quite a bit. And I did a reel. And I said, people talk about pressure testing all the time. Look behind me. You see that fucking cage? That's pretty pressure testing, isn't it? Where's that guy? Are you here tonight? You got who's your fighter? You know what I'm saying? And that's the beauty of doing what we do, because we're operationally pure. We actually, it's a fight gym. We have no kids. We don't teach kids. We only teach fighters. The only reason this gym exists is for combatives seminars and for fighters. That's it. So it's really funny when people cast stones and you go, bro, my address here is 19 Barron Park Road, Fredericksburg, Virginia, Suite 101. Drag your ass up here because I got a bunch of guys dying to meet you. Of course, they never do, right?
Yep.
They go silent. So it's just fun.
Yeah, and not
Excellent.
only that, Kelly, you get in there with your boys.
Still.
Yeah. You mentioned you're 65. Nobody's got excuses out there, and I
Nope.
would say 65. I still think Aaron and I are 50.
Yep.
But still yet. 65 and jumping in there with young men on a regular basis is most assuredly admirable.
I would feel that I didn't have the credibility to coach them if I didn't. Like, I can corner them. I could be, like Angelo Dundee or, Customato. They didn't fight. They had fought, but they stopped doing it. And that day will come. I mean, I don't know when I'm 70 or some shit like that, but right now, I would lose their respect. I feel I would lose my self-respect if I didn't get in there and let's go. Let's put it on the old man. And I'm going to put it on you. And sometimes it's just a really good exercise and makes those guys proud of me. It's important that my fighters are proud of me. Not that
That's awesome.
I'm always proud of them, but I want them to be proud of me too. So that, like I said, I hope you heard my talk down at the summit, and the days of the prancing peacock in the dojo, right? Who has stopped moving and he stopped doing anything. See you guys, and have stopped doing anything, but they got that black belt. Those days are gone, bro. You gotta knuckle up. You gotta let people see that you can still do it.
That's awesome. I love it. With that said, Kelly, this kind of becomes a little bit more bleak of a question. We currently, depending on how you look at the numbers, and I don't completely believe the numbers. Not necessarily that the FBI was trying to cover anything up per se, but
The uniform crime reports.
Yep, UCR, right. So we know that the UCR of 2019 to 2020 was a 30% increase in murder. And if you look at the Bureau of Justice statistics that in that time frame, I believe it was around 44%. And now the new UCR, and I don't have the acronym of the newest, the way that the UCR is developed, it's like an amalgamation of the Bureau of Justice statistic modeling
Data.
and but it's still climbing, and I would say that it's climbing further. Not to mention, of course, we know that aggravated assault is a murder that didn't work. It's on the climb, and just plain violent crime and assault is up. So for individuals out there, walking in this world, and let's just, anywhere in the world or in the United States, I would say is what we're really concerned about because it's closest to us. But it used to be that you had a 1 in 4 chance of a violent encounter. That was well before we have been seeing what we've been seeing. Now, I guess I'm framing this question. I mean, the world of violence is getting horrible. Your thoughts on that, and should people need to be taking that serious, right?
I couldn't agree more. In the length of time that I've been doing our Streetwise presentation for corporate clients, I mean, huge multinational corporations that bring us in to make their expats safe and make their workers safe, like in Detroit and Chicago and where they have home offices. We do a ton of that business. It's a 2-hour presentation and it's pretty slick. But in the length of time I've been doing that, guys, that percentage that you just called out, 1 in 4, I've lived through 1 in 12, 1 in 10, 1 in 8, 1 in 6, now 1 in 4. In the length of time, in what, 30 years or something like that? This is real. This is actually happening. And gone are the days where people go, yeah, well, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. No, there's so much you can do to avoid it, right? And that's a fatalistic approach that you guys train people. I know that you too probably just roll your eyes like, are you kidding? Did that just come out of your mouth? Let's just take a Sharpie and put V on your forehead for victim. How about that? And call it good. Because if you're not willing to protect you and yours, you're failing at the number one thing that we as men and women, like Michelle, my partner, and all that, must do. We have a right to do that. And I think that's a reflection of a poor economy, right? I mean, when things get hard and the inflation is so hard, people can't even feed themselves right now. People are living off multiple credit cards. This is the United States. I shouldn't have to buy groceries on credit. That's crazy. That's a crazy idea. Okay. You've got the immigrants coming in, and God knows who's got the answer to that. That has to be intentional. Do we agree with that? I mean, that absolutely has to be intentional. Okay. We as U.S. citizens can't go anywhere in the world and do that. They'd throw us out.
No.
They'd throw you in jail, and then they'd deport you. So we've got this influx of not the best and brightest from those countries, but the poorest, the most criminal, the most, and not all of them. I don't want to have anybody listening out there, blow up in my face, go, not all immigrant. No shit. I get that. But there's sure a bunch of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a bunch of MS-13. There's a bunch of guys coming up from Venezuelan criminal gangs. There's a bunch of Haitian criminal gangs. And, and I'm not being racist. I am not a racist. Okay. But that's just a fact.
That's reality. Yep.
That's ground truth. So you've got that element going on. And then you've got this idea in society right now that anything's okay, right? Everything's okay. We have 18 genders. Men can have children. Anything's okay. And the fact of the matter is everything's not okay, man. Everything is not okay. And the biggest thing that we've lost is the right to be disinterested. Like if someone is like they got purple hair, they got their black nails on, and they're screaming in your face about, trans, and you say, listen, honestly, I don't care. And I want to exercise my right to indifference. Mm-hmm. Now you're not allowed to do that. If you say, I don't care, you're against, and they want you to come over to their side and be for, but I'm not for, and I'm not against. I don't care. Same-sex marriage, same thing. I don't give a shit. I mean, I understand the effect that has on, people that are in a Christian community and have been brought up with the idea of marriage between a woman and a man. But honestly, it doesn't affect me, right? I don't care, but don't suck me into your vortex. So that kind of carefree, everything's okay, has fed the idea that you can just take stuff. Look in California right now, you can steal up to, what is it, $999 worth of stuff in full view of a store employee and walk out of the store, and no one can challenge you. In fact, those corporations don't want you to be challenged. Are you kidding me? You can't do that in El Salvador. You can't do that in Chile, where I just came from. You can't do that in Colombia. You can't do that in Bosnia. You can't do that anywhere else in the world. But in the United States, you can go in to multiple stores, one right after another, and steal up to $1,000 worth of stuff and be totally fine. Are you kidding me? So all of this is what it adds up to, Aaron and Eric, is just a sick society. And I don't mean sick like, oh, he's a sick guy. I mean sick. We're not healthy.
Nope.
Right now.
There's no empathy for your fellow man.
No.
Bottom line.
No. How many times have you guys, when you're out and about and talking to people and everything like that, and I'm sure you carry daily and, do what you do, and you talk to people who think you're an absolute nut job for doing that?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Yeah, on a fairly regular basis. Like how paranoid are you? Where do you live where you think you got to carry a firearm all the time?
Man, read the paper. Yeah. Go online and read the news, man. If you go onto your Facebook page, the sheriff's departments do a good job at posting what crime has happened in your area. That's all you got to do. If that doesn't convince you, you're kind of a lost cause, man.
Well, and go ahead, Aaron.
I like to interject on that when someone, and it doesn't happen a ton, but it happens enough because it's at least the people that are bold enough to ask you about it. What are you so afraid of? And I like retorting saying, actually, I'm really not that afraid of anything. I'm just prepared.
Yeah.
I might be afraid if I wasn't prepared, but no, I'm concerned about things maybe happening to me and my family, but I'll do my best to prepare. And that means to train. That means to know how to shoot. That means to know what's going all around me. To be in physical health, all of it.
Recognize in other words, and indicators, all of that.
Yeah. So it's not an issue of. It's funny how you can't. It's so foreign to them that they think it must be fear, and then they still can't fathom it when you say, "Actually, I'm not afraid really of anything," and that's the honest truth, is it not? Truth.
Yes. Well, it's interesting you say that because about a year ago or 2 years ago, I was getting pretty deep into how social media works because I'm a dinosaur, man. I'm an analog guy, right? And so like this whole social media thing is new to me, and sometimes I understand it. Sometimes I misplay it because I get pissed off when I shouldn't and all that stuff. But there was someone that was really interesting and knowledgeable about it, and they said that the one thing that you cannot combat efficiently is ridicule. Okay, so take your example, Aaron. If someone is on the edge of ridicule, they're ridiculing you for carrying a weapon, being watchful, having a high state of situational awareness. It's hard for you to combat that, right? To confront that, because they're the one that's being ridiculous by not being able to take care of business, right? So it ends up a big shit fight, and we all know wrestling with pigs, you both get dirty, the pig loves it, right? So I find that nowadays what I'll do is just disengage, politely, courteously. Just I get that we can't have a conversation because evidently in today's society, it's not okay anymore to agree to disagree. Someone has to win. You know what I mean? And that's wrong too, right? There's always several ways to solve the same problem. But people want to be the burning bush, and they want to be identified as the person with the solution. And there's never just one solution. So that's annoying.
Yeah, and the very fact that there is honestly a particular worldview that really thinks that way, that they want to force their ideals on us.
Yes.
And I would say that, if we can include ourselves in very similar philosophies, we don't feel that way. We don't feel that our opinion that we believe so strongly about, and we frankly believe that there is empirical data support what we believe.
You could point at it.
Yeah. Yeah. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, you see it all over the college campuses right now. Not to, of course, I don't have any problems with saying how I support Israel 100%. Um, and I brought this subject up to Aaron, not that we intended to go down this road for a split second, but agitators are being paid right
Of
now
course.
in the streets. I mean, it's amazing to me to see an encampment in Colombia where there's 20 tents in a row that I could see in the film or in the camera, that were all the same color and all the same model.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. So, and I saw a story. I'm not gonna quote exactly. It probably was on Fox or Breitbart. I guess that paints me. Somebody in the audience that doesn't like our worldview.
Ridicule.
Yeah.
I ridicule you.
But I think I saw upwards of $3,000 to $8,000 that some of these individuals are making in an 8-hour period.
Hey, listen, those guys, people don't understand this. They don't believe it's happening, right? But those paid protesters train, and they have strategy. If you look at the Antifa crowd, for example, disguising weapons as placards, as poll placards, right?
Yep.
Pre-staging bags of bricks and frozen water bottles. They get into phalanx formations, right? So, come on, I mean, I always ask the question, guys, and we'll never know the answer to this, but who's actually pulling the strings? Like, what actually is this agenda? The most terrifying thing would be that we're a rudderless ship just floating around and just, kind of like listing this way and rolling that way because of the waves. I don't believe that. I tend to believe that there's an effort somehow, some way behind this to direct us in a particular direction. And it is pretty transparent. If you critically think, you can see it, but I'll be damned if I can find who's behind it. I mean, if you look at, like, for instance, and again, we don't want to get political, but the Chinese, if they dropped a bomb that killed as many people as fentanyl has killed, that would be a weapon of mass destruction, right? At the same time they're doing that, financially, they're in a position to break our back because
Yep.
we're overextended. And then in real estate and farming, they own so much property that if they call the notes at once, it's a bloodless war, right? It's a bloodless coup. And I'll say that to people and they go, yeah, but not really. No, really. And even if they don't like actually consummate the coup, it gives them all the bargaining power. So it's still a tactic.
Well, and Kelly, so two comments down that road is, along with all of this that we're talking about, again, the people that are concerned with self-protection,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe not concerned about these things. There's a reason I'm kind of hitting on this point with some discussions Aaron and I have had recently on the air. Along with all that comes a higher rate of violence in the
Yes.
world. So again, with those individuals that are pulling the strings, we know some of those individuals. Along with that comes higher violent crime.
Yes.
So individuals need to take that serious. And
So,
kind
Eric,
of go ahead.
So just putting a fine point on that, these politics that are leading us in certain directions
Mm-hmm.
are increasing crime.
Yes.
We're focusing again because where we are in the United States, but Eric, like you said, they don't want us to talk politically. But why are they here? Are they listening to this show to better protect themselves? And I'm pretty dang sure that's the case. They aren't here just
I
to
would agree.
listen to the handful of musicians that we have on the show. The fact is, they're here to learn about self protection and protect themselves. So they better listen to this shit.
100%.
And Kelly, just so you know, I don't know if you listen to our show much. It's okay. Otherwise, we've had some folks
I do actually,
complain.
by the way. So
Thank you, sir. We've had some individuals that want to they want to complain about our political discussions, and when we talk about politics, it's probably 10%. It may not even be that. It's probably more like 5%. But we have been a little more verbose on, if anything, political philosophy and these directions we're moving in. But yeah, we've gotten
and by
we
the
have
way,
been
it's our right to do that.
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's like Aaron and I say all the time: you cannot extricate politics from self-protection. So yeah, I mean,
No.
we go ahead.
Okay, let's talk about a direct causal relationship. Government policy drives prosecution. And what are you seeing about the percentage of prosecutions across the country? They've dropped off completely, exactly. So you've got highly violent people that basically go through a revolving door. They commit a violent crime. They go in, they get booked and all that stuff. And boom, they're kicked right back out on the street. Now, when has that ever been okay? And we're not talking about like, jaywalking. We're talking about people for aggravated assault, for suspected attempted murder, for assault, and they go right through and come right out the door again. They're back on the street in a couple hours. So how is that protecting society?
Yeah, and we see the results, like you said, causal. It absolutely has a direct causation. Well, Kelly, this is a great discussion. We don't like to get bleak, but we also we say to folks when we can. Yes, sometimes we talk about some hard subjects, but we care about the individuals that listen to our show. We care about our families. We care about our friends. And so, yes, it's important to make sure that folks, hopefully at some point, some of those individuals that don't like that piece of our show, that they at least start to see it, but it may not happen.
If you don't talk about it, about dark stuff, it only gets darker, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Aaron, I think let's move this into kind of a fun direction for a little bit here, and I'm going to hand it over to you.
Sure. Well, now let's just take some fun here and have some red meat here about some firearm stuff. Okay, what is your your personal firearms training? look like these days? And I mean, if you want to talk about your EDC or anything like that, but where are you on that these days?
And Aaron, could I interrupt real quick too? I want to remind our audience that Kelly, to our understanding, was the first person to put a red dot on a pistol.
That's true.
Is that, I thought that was true, Kelly.
And it's
So
documented. I actually did a video with it on in the, so it's documented.
Cool.
I think momentum, people get it. A lot of people were running their mouth, and then too many people went, "Hey, look at this video, look at this book, look at this article in Guns and Ammo." So yeah, I did that.
cool. But go ahead, Kelly. I'm sorry. I just had to interject that.
Thank you, brother. So what I do now is, my days of jocking fully up, I don't feel it necessary to do that anymore. Like, with a full blown, G19 with my light, my red dot, 2 magazines, gun belt, and all of that stuff. Right now, it's situationally dependent. Right, if I'm going somewhere that requires that, certainly I'll do it. So I had shifted years back, and I still would do it in what we call felony carry, which is appendix carry, because that's where felon carries their gun. So every once in a while, yeah, I'll put it there, But now I used to have a 5-shot J frame, and I had a Brammy hip grip with a Melvin Tyler T, so the grip was a little bit bigger and easier to control. And then I'd wrap that with an inner tube, shoot it with off DEET, and then wipe it off, and it's real tacky. So that made a really good pocket gun, right? Because the best gun you're going to have is the one you have with you. So a lot of times people have a mainframe gun, but it's too much of a pain in the ass to jock up and to run down to 7-Eleven or Wawa. And so with the revolver, why don't you have it? I mean, it's so convenient, right? Like, why wouldn't you have that? But I recently replaced that with an LCP Max, and I did it in 380. And a lot of people were like, "Oh, it's not a major caliber." If you check the ballistic performance of today's 380s, right? You know where I'm going with it, Aaron.
Oh yeah,
they outperform. So I went from a 5-shot 38 to a 13-shot, because you get the extended magazine thing, LCP Max, which has surprisingly good tritium sights on it. The trigger's the same as a Glock. It functions the same as Glock. The trigger feels the same as a Glock, and it's wicked convenient to carry. So that's my go-to now, right? That's what I'll like throw in my back pocket. Are you going to draw like on the timer with it? No, right, it's not going to happen. You need a holster for that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, it's a really, really good alternative. So that's my EDC. But still, I teach. Obviously, when I teach, I use the G19 with a Trijicon RMR. Trijicon gave me my gun because I was so involved in their development of the line of pistol sights. They actually gave me a custom Glock that's engraved and has their RMR, and then I put a TLR on it for a light. So that's what I teach with. I go out, and David Bowie, by the way, did the work. Shout out to David Bowie in Ohio. Nice. Does fantastic work.
Sweet.
Heard great things about him.
But what I do now, guys, is I have an inexpensive strike man system, okay, which gives you feedback. You put an arbor in it, a laser arbor in it, and you set it up. You put your phone in this little cradle, and it looks at the target and basically reads your the burst of the laser. And the reason that I chose that is because it doesn't overload me with data. I'm not going to call out any manufacturer because they're good products. They just provide too much data, right? I mean, there's just too much. So I didn't want that. I mean, I can already shoot well, obviously, and all I need to know is that I'm maintaining what I got, and that if I can improve, I am, but I'm maintaining what I got. So I have a dry fire regimen. I usually take a cord and I stretch it between a doorway with thumbtacks at sternum level, and I move up to the cord so it's actually touching. And then when I do my draw, it forces a high 90, right? Because I'm a big believer in a high 90, no scooping, but that it comes up to the TPI, which again is me, right? The thumb pectoral index. Go back and look at my videos. I did that before anyone even knew about it. Okay, I developed that. So it comes up, you touch your pectoral muscle, collect the gun, orient the gun, boom, and push straight forward. So by having that cord there, it forces you to have that high 90, which means I can pick up the sights earlier, I can get on the trigger earlier, et cetera, et cetera. So that's my regimen. And then when I go on the range and I'm doing live fire, I usually do not the stuff I like to do, but I punish myself and do the things I don't like to do, right? So I'll do like weak hand double fates, or, weak hand stuff that's just no one likes to do it because you can already do your reloads. They're easy, I got it, and they're fun. I don't do much fun stuff. I just torture myself to make sure that I can still maintain in those situations. And then I do elevated heart training, right? So because of I always say people are victims of experience, but at least I've fucking had some, you know, and that heart rate going from, for me, my resting heart rate is 50 because I got brachycardia from all the PT and stuff I've done over the years, from 50 to 200 beats a minute instantly. Now, what that does, of course, you have essential tremor, you have rapid breathing, you're not as stable with the weapon. So I like to elevate my heart rate and do some fair amount of shooting with that because I know that that's the condition I'm going to be in when it happens, And another last thing that I'll tell you is I like to do a lot of long range shooting. So I do a lot of 25-yard shooting. And because if you can get away with it at 357, right? Because, the sight, radius is okay at 357. But when you get back to the 25, it keeps you honest. If you can get away with it at 3 and 5, but you're not going to get away with it at 25. So I like to spend a fair amount of time at 25, coming from the holster, not doing like standard bullseye shooting, but coming from the holster and going to the thoracic cavity at 25. Time slow down, obviously, as distance increases, so does time. But I find that I get more bang for the buck doing that than I do just doing drills that I'm really good at and comfortable with.
It sounds kind of like you're really needing to get in the ring and mix it up. Kind of has spilled over into your firearms training. You don't love getting punched, but hey, you don't love shooting strong hand only or weak hand only either.
Exactly.
Awesome.
It's a good observation. Aaron.
Yeah, I'll just comment about the 25 stuff. Aaron and I have talked about that quite a bit recently. It is hard and sometimes can be frustrating, but man, it pays such great dividends.
It absolutely does. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, it's amazing how much you can work on your grip and all the muscles that work into your grip by needing to steady your platform to shoot well at something like 25.
And by the way, it also, so I shoot a really big MOA, right? I think I'm at a 5 MOA. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I've had a lot of people kind of shake their head and they go, oh, it obscures the target. Dude, I shoot at 25 all the time. It doesn't obscure the target. That's a stupid statement. If I'm going to have a dot, I want that thing screaming at me. Okay. Mm-hmm. Here's something also, guys, from my time with red dots. The very first drill that I do with, there's an overage of information to guys that are teaching red dot, and they start getting into the physiology of the eye and all that shit. Students just start drooling, right? They're just like information overload, right? Like that may be why it works and how it works, but I just want to use my sight. So the very first thing that I explain is I tell them, number one, don't treat the red dot like a 3-dot system. And they'll go, what do you mean? And I'll say, do not look through the aperture. Don't look through the windshield and focus on the dot and center the dot in the windshield. Don't do that. And they'll go, well, but that's how it works. It's not how it works. Okay. You target focus and you're merely aware of where the dot is, but you're not tunneling your vision through the windshield. Because if you do that, now you've lost one of the benefits of the red dot, which is an expanded, area of vision. That's the first thing. And then what I do to prove it to them, I do I call a corner drill. Okay. So I'll say, take the weapon, put the dot, get a sight picture, put the dot where you want the round to hit. Now move the sight so it's in the upper left-hand corner of the structure of the sight and press the trigger. And of course they do, and it hits exactly where the dot is. Then I have them do it to the right dot, then I have them do it in the low right, then I have them do it in the low left. And I spend time doing that so that they become familiar with and okay with occlusion, right? I mean, like the dots over here in the sight, right? It's over here. But as long as that dot is where you intend it to do, to hit, to strike, you're fine. So it relieves the shooter of having to do a conscious alignment, which is what a 3-dot system is, right? A 3-dot system, you've got to check, left, right, and make sure that it's flush on top. Red dot removes that from you. If you can see the dot, it's aligned, right? So just move that alignment to where you want it to be. And dude, the epiphany that gives people. People will tell me, Kelly, I've been shooting this thing for 5 years, but I've been treating it like a 3-dot sight. Yeah, you're not getting your money's worth. That basic understanding is missing in a lot of guys that are out there teaching RDS because they don't know what the hell they're talking about. They got a new toy, and then they try to make it hard. The whole purpose of that sight, I started putting it on a pistol for sight commonality, right? So that if I was on my primary weapon, which was red dot, and I dropped it and transitioned, I didn't want to have my brain or my eyes have to go to now I'm doing focal transition and I'm looking at the front sight. I literally wanted to go red dot to red dot because that made the most sense. Then my eyesight started deteriorating and there were other reasons to be on the red dot. But the base thing about a red dot is it's supposed to make it more simple to use. But you go to some of these classes and that's the last thing you walk away. You walk away thinking, oh my God, this is like rocket scientist shit. I'm going to have to study on this. It usually takes, in my experience, 1,500 to 2,000 rounds to index the gun properly, right? So 1,500 rounds, 2,000 rounds, you're pulling it out, and with consistency, you can get on the dot. At first, as you guys know, I'm sure, you're kind of hunting the dot, right? You're where's my head got to be? What's the attitude of the gun? My grip doesn't work the same, blah, blah, blah. So what I've found almost is universal on Glocks is that the muzzle will be depressed. You'll be on sight, but the muzzle has a slight downward cant because of the leading thumb grip, right? So if you're camming your offside wrist completely, not this, but this, all the way flat, okay, all the way flat, and you attach that to the weapon, you're going to be there. You'll get there. So then it's just a matter of repetition. Right? Boom, boom. And that 1,500 to 2,000 rounds puts them right in there and they never go back. I've never had anyone say, I don't like this. I'm going to go back to an iron sight. Never.
Yeah, it was definitely a learning curve, but now it's second nature now,
And like cheating.
Yeah.
Oh, it made, so my vision was going bad for quite a while. And our audience, I'm sure, remembers that just a couple years ago, I had cataract surgery, early onset cataract. Yep. During that, before I had surgery, I got my first red dot, and I'm talking about the skills that I had as a shooter actually were revealed. They were covered up with my vision, and then they kind of came back. Yep. So, but instantly, I shot 30% better. And I'm not some high level competitor or anything, but the deal is that still, since I've been running red dots and I've been getting my strength back after having neck surgery, every match I go to, it's actually been the best match I've ever shot.
That's awesome, Aaron.
And I'm telling you, a lot of it's the dot, a lot of it's my strength coming back, etc., and my vision. But yeah, it's really weird. So of course, Eric and I teach firearms, and I taught a pretty big ladies class this weekend, and it was a blast. But it's still so strange. All of us go to a pistol class, and 90% of the people have dots. But then when you teach some of these classes like this, there was one person with a dot.
Yep.
So
exactly.
But at the same time, the good thing is if you know how to run both, you can instruct people in both. But
I mean, the big thing is the standards, right? So like you're holding yourself to a standard. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times people will go out there and they don't even have a valid standard. I break our standards into 3 levels, right? So the first one is armed citizen. and I won't go bore you with like all of them. Just talk first shot from a conceal. I always conceal the gun. I cannot stand watching people on Instagram posting 1.2s, 1.3s from an open holster. So what?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's big deal. Okay. So the way I break them down is the concerned citizen or concealed weapon citizen. If you're able to put 2 rounds in 2.5 seconds at 7 yards in an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, which is all I use, thoracic cavity, good. That's a good standard
Cool.
for them. Next standard is police and official users, security personnel, stuff like that. It's 2 seconds at 7, concealed holster into a thoracic cavity. And then the tier 1 guys and the operators, it's 2 rounds in 1.5 seconds, concealed at 7, duty gun, duty ammo, duty holster. And that's how I manage, like, what group is this? Or if I have a mixed group, I'll hold that tier guy to that standard, but I'll let this person who's just a concealed weapons user go to his level. You know what I mean? So that what I've learned is, and you guys know this, is when you have a line, you never raise the benchmark like this. It's more like a music equalizer. And when you turn the volume up, every level goes up. They all won't be the same level, but you'll get more out of every single value. That's the way I approach it.
Yeah,
Awesome.
cool.
Very cool. Those are interesting and cool to hear. So Kelly, moving on to another jovial subject, I've heard you mention, books a lot. It certainly is evidence you're an avid reader. For audience members out there, especially related to this path we're all talking about this evening, could you, recommend a handful of books that you think everybody should own?
Sure. Obviously my book, right? Combatives for Street Survival. I think that's a pretty seminal book. It's like in its 8th printing or something like that. And it's not the average book that you believe. You buy it thinking it's going to be a technique book. It's anything but. It's a mindset book. It's a funny book. It's a serious book. It's people have told me it's a really good read. So I would encourage people to just kind of give me the opportunity to put that book in front of them. Number one. But number two, there's a lot of good books that come from, let's call it the late 80s, some of John Shaw's books, some of Rob Letham's books, some of Massa Youb's books, believe it or not, Chuck Taylor's books. Remember old Chuck Taylor?
Oh, yeah,
Remember he was the
absolutely.
first master shooter and all that stuff? People have forgotten about him. I wonder why, because he hitting his master achievement was hard. That was a hard test, man. So I kind of like to think that there's that genre of books, that year group, call it 80 to late 90s, and then go deep, then go old. Read Sykes' book on shooting,
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
Shooting to Live.
I've heard you mention that before.
Yep. Not because you're going to adopt what they're talking about, but for the background information, okay? So, like, no one's going to go back to the FBI crouched, kind of like gun in front of you. But it's important to read what Jelly Bryce, the FBI guy, had to say about reading. Okay. Remember Fitz,
Cool.
the guy that used to do the carnival shooting and all that stuff? They've got his hand, a cast of his hand, and his gun in the NRA museum. The guy was an incredible shooter. I mean, he could make a revolver do ridiculous things. And
Oh, yeah.
reading how he came up with what he competed with and what he used to demonstrate with was pure gold, right? People don't like it. They don't like to read old books because the language is transatlantic, so it's a little bit difficult to read. And the pictures are in black and white, and they always think that, or they forget that those old guys were young studs at one point. You look at like Marines going to World War II, getting ready and training in combatives and all of that. And, they go, oh, look at this old black and white footage. Look at them. Look at their abs. Look at the look in their eyes. It wasn't a joke because they knew they were going to go over and face the Japanese.
Oh, yeah, damn right.
This was imminent, So you might not like the techniques or anything like that, but the drive and the intensity, that's what you take from it. So short answer is I try to read everything. You know what I mean? Good, bad, indifferent. If it's bad, it just validates that I don't want to do it. But rarely have I read a book where I didn't pick up a handful of things that I thought were like, wow, I didn't know that before. Okay, put that right back there, So I think that those are must reads, There's a book by a fellow writer from Black Belt. It was a Combatives book. I'm trying to think of his name. Good guy. I've known him a million years, but he wrote a very comprehensive book and interviewed Matt Larson. He interviewed me. He had his own take on it and all that stuff. I wish I could remember his name, but that is
We can look it up and
yeah,
try to put it in the notes
yeah,
when it
please do,
releases.
because he rates that. I mean, it's that good of a book. Oh, by the way, there are two other books that by Sam Sheridan that are excellent: Heart of a Fighter, Mind of a Fighter. Heart of a Fighter, Mind of a Fighter. Those are both really, really in-depth, good books about the fight game, what it takes to fight, where the heart comes from, how a fighter's head works. And one last book, it doesn't really have technique in it or anything like that, but it's a tragic story and just a really good read, is Jens Pulver's books. Jens Pulver, former UFC champion, used to fight out of
Yep.
military camp.
Oh yeah.
Man, he was abused physically by his dad. His dad, when he started to get successful, came back and stole his car, stole money. What that guy overcame was just incredible. And I'd plug his book too. I mean, that was just a really solid emotional read. That was a
Man,
really good.
I am kind of I every now and then crave books like that. So I remember Jens Pulver very well, and I do remember just on the ancillary, um, remember hearing about some of that. So I'll pick up that book for certain.
Excellent.
Well, cool. Well, Aaron, I think this puts us getting close to the end of the show, man.
It does, and I'll tell you what, Kelly, this has been a blast.
Oh, thanks,
I,
guys.
I've been enamored by the conversation here. Now, but this does bring us to the most important question on the show, and that is, what are your top 3 favorite musicians and or bands?
Whew. You guys are gonna go, what?
No, we
Number one, and I'll even call out the album, Talking Heads.
Okay.
Talking Heads, Stop Making Sense. You can watch it on YouTube. David Byrne in the big Gumby suit. that
Mm-hmm.
that music is just so, to me, man, that music resonates, right? I love that album, but I also love a lot of their other stuff. They got some quirky, weird stuff that I'll definitely skip past, but I love Talking Heads. Old style classic rock, The Who. I take The Who over Zeppelin any day. Sorry. I
Awesome.
just love that band. I love what they came out with, and I still rock it in here with the guys and all of that. And then for genre, ska. I love
oh,
ska.
cool.
I love the English beat. I love the specials. There's a ton of ska bands out, because if you don't get happy listening to ska, there's something majorly wrong with you, right? Like that music just is so upbeat and so, it's just fantastic. I love me some ska. That's what I'd have to say.
Man, excellent answers. I
Very good
love it.
answers.
You
Thanks,
know,
brother.
I'm not a fan of the Talking Heads myself, but that is not taken apart from their music. The fact is, they're way more cerebral
Yes.
than people just listening to them. I mean, still brilliant music.
And
Brilliant music.
I've drummed all my life, right? So like
What? Okay.
I'm an avid drummer, and so the style of percussion in all of those three things, right? The Talking Heads, the Who, and ska. Man, I could just like sit behind my kit for hours and just whack that out.
Well,
I love it.
I don't know. I didn't know you were a drummer. To be honest with you,
Yep.
and you're tracking. I'm a drummer, right?
Oh no,
Yep.
outstanding, man.
Yeah. So, Aaron and I grew up grew up. It was probably about ninth grade when we really started playing. But yeah, Aaron and I, now not as much lately, but he and I play a lot of the bumper music for this show.
Oh, no kidding. That's awesome,
Yeah.
guys.
So if you hear a lot of it right now, Aaron, I think Aaron put one of our songs on not too long ago, but we also have the drummer of Primus.
Yes.
Um,
Outstanding drummer.
we had him, believe it or not, if you go back to show 73, I think it hadn't been booted off for 100 episodes yet. But it was a really interesting turn of events when we had him on, because he's my biggest influence.
Yep.
But the show turned into nothing about music, because he had been accosted, and he carries a pistol when he can, and he wanted to discuss self-protection stuff. So, but yeah, so he was my biggest influence. And yeah, I mean, Aaron, like I said, Aaron and I grew up playing together, and so Tim gave us permission to use some of his music, and so did the guitarist and singer of Saigon Kick, Jason Bieler.
Oh,
And
nice.
so you'll hear a lot of that on there, but Aaron still mixes ours in. We got some more stuff we're about to record too.
Yeah, I keep coming up with riffs here and there, but just haven't had any time to sit down and record anything. I'm gonna have to. You can probably see a handful of guitars behind me. I am more of a guitar player than anything. I've played guitar for about 36, 37 years now, and it's awesome. Rarely, so Kelly, someone with your experience in the combatives and, frankly, martial world, then we start talking about music, and then you light up about the music and light up about playing music. Isn't it amazing that all of us, or this world that we live in when it comes to the genre of our show, just martial arts and the martial life, it's amazing how people don't realize how artistic a lot of us are either.
No, they think that we're just kind of like thugs and dull-witted or dim-witted. You're absolutely correct. There's a lot of smart people, a lot of creative people, a lot of spiritual people that are in this community. I think that the greater perception is we're big, dumb jocks, and we just like to roll around and beat the shit out of each other. But like you, Aaron, and like you, Eric, I've learned that so I'm sitting right now, and this is our gym. You can see our gym behind me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sitting at our gym bar. We have a bar in our gym, and the taps are right there. The whiskey's right there.
Rock on.
The kegs are right there. And the purpose of that is when we do seminars, I'll meet people on the mat, and talk to them, and that how you know them out there is, paper thin. Where I really get to know them is sitting here, listening to music, talking over a couple of Guinness, a couple of Jamesons. Ask about their kids. Do they like to play an instrument? What kind of music do they like? Right? And a lot of times guys will want to keep talking about what we were doing out on the mat, and I have to shut them down. I'll go, bro, you didn't get enough yet? I mean, we did that all day. Ask me a question about music. Ask me a question about trucks. Ask me, or let me ask you a question. You're right. You just brought humanity into it, Aaron. And a lot of people who think that when we're doing tough guy stuff, shooting and banging and rolling and all that, that we don't have a compassionate side, and that we don't have a humanistic side. And I've found that to be absolutely untrue.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, if you go down range and you don't have a moral compass and you're not controlled in a war zone, you could probably do just about anything you want to do. So the thing that keeps it on the rails is this, what you just brought up, Aaron, is the music, the kids. Are you a human? Are you a dad? Are you an uncle? What's keeping you doing the right thing in combat? Because quite frankly, you could do just about anything and get away with it. And we saw some of that behavior, didn't we, in Afghanistan and in Iraq?
Yeah.
So
Unfortunately, we did. Yeah.
That both of you, that was an excellent point.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, I'll tell you what, that is a dadgum mic drop. So excellent, man. This has been a blast. I can't wait for our audience to hear this blast and fun and informative interview. It's been, man, just been a pleasure to hang out with you virtually, Kelly. Eric's
Awesome
been
time.
telling me about having you on for a while, and he said he was so excited, and now I know why.
Well, thanks, guys. Make a date with me, and you're just down in North Carolina. When you're going north, we'll continue that right here at the bar I'm sitting at.
Awesome. Where are you at exactly again?
Fredericksburg, Virginia, just below Quantico.
I will absolutely make the time to come up there and see you get my ass kicked a little bit, and
Please do.
And then yeah, I'll certainly share some drinks with you afterwards.
Absolutely.
I will make that happen,
Rock
Kelly.
and roll.
Absolutely.
Awesome, guys.
Hey, take it easy, guys. Have a good night.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, and thank you, Eric.
Thank you very much, Kelly. Good to have you. We're gonna do it again.
Let's
Oh
go.
yeah. All right.